Okay, good afternoon, esteemed guests, advocates, survivors, and allies. My name is Marcel van der Watt, and I'm the president here at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. And I'm honored to welcome you to the launch of our groundbreaking report, Not a Fantasy, How the Pornography Industry Exploits Image-Based Sexual Abuse in Real Life. This afternoon, we really confront the digital abyss where an online sexual exploitation marketplace thrives with impunity. Really a shadowy bazaar that trades in human dignity and is doing so with no compunction. This really is an untamed wildfire of exploitation, and it's fueled by distributed non-consensual content, anonymous uploads, and algorithmic nudges that really normalizes abuse. It really comes down to a machine that churns out trauma cloaked in the euphemism of fantasy, as if the real life suffering of those depicted can be dismissed as mere fiction. So let's just make it clear, this is not normal, and this should never be tolerated. But we are not here to despair. At the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, we are committed to confronting this crisis head-on, to really shining a light on these dark corners and dismantling systems that enable and perpetuate these harms. So your presence here today and online signals that you too refuse to accept this indifference. The report that we'll be unpacking today, really meticulously authored by our team, is another very sharp arrow in our collective quiver aimed at piercing and deoxygenating this harmful phenomenon. It exposes the pornography industry's systemic complicity in fueling image-based sexual abuse and offers bold, actionable solutions to hold perpetrators accountable and protect the vulnerable. Over the next hour, we'll delve into important evidence and unpack the report's urgent findings. But we will do so with resolve, with hope, with courage, and with unwavering belief that together we are, in fact, building a world where dignity triumphs over indifference. So thank you for being here, and let's make the next hour count. Thank you. And yeah, over to you.
Thank you all for being here today. Wow, this report is not just another report. It's a wake-up call. It's a call to action for every one of us to confront the harsh and painful truths about how abuse is perpetuated, monetized, and normalized by one of the largest industries in the world. At the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, our mission is to fight against sexual exploitation and abuse, striving to dismantle the practices and societal norms that perpetuate these horrifying crimes. Today, we're going to shine a light on one of the most pervasive and devastating forms of abuse, image-based sexual abuse, or IBSA. Today we sit here and watch online, and we ask ourselves a difficult question. What do we mean when we call something a fantasy? The word suggests imagination, something harmless, something impossible. But when it's applied to pornography, the reality it obscures is far from harmless. The pornography industry has worked tirelessly to tell consumers that what they see on their screens is simply fantasy, a harmless indulgence. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. What people are consuming is far from imaginary. It's real. It's painfully real. The people depicted in these videos are real individuals who have been degraded, abused, exploited, oftentimes without their consent. And for some consumers, this lack of consent is the very thing that increases their desire to consume it. Our report exposes a hard truth about how pornography industry profits from and normalizes image-based sexual abuse. IBSA, image-based sexual abuse, includes many forms of harm, such as non-consensual distribution of sexually explicit material, recorded sexual violence, video voyeurism, and computer-generated content like deepfake pornography. These abuses are not isolated incidents, they're systemic, they're widespread, and they're intentionally exploited by the pornography industry for their financial gain. It's important to note today that when we're discussing IBSA in this report, we're focused on adults, as any sexually explicit material involving children is child sexual abuse material, or otherwise known as CSAM, or child pornography, which has its own very specific legal penalties. It's important to remember that when someone turns 18, the harms of sexual violation do not evaporate, they still have long-lasting trauma. No individual who's been victimized in this way deserves any sort of violation. Whether their images were taken by force, they were secretly recorded, they were manipulated through technology, or even if they were taken and monetized consensually before being non-consensually repurposed later on, every person should have the right to live free from the exploitation of their likeness and of their body. Here, today, is where we must come together. Together, we must demand change. No longer can we accept euphemisms or false narratives that shield abuse from scrutiny. During today's event, you'll hear first from survivors and lawyers about the impact of IBSA abuse in the pornography industry. You'll see a short Undercover video from Sound Investigations, and then we'll review some key findings from the Not a Fantasy report. I urge you all to read the report, to share its findings, and to take action. The reality is harsh, but together we can confront it. Together we can dismantle it. Thank you. So I'll go ahead and call up our next moderator. Thank you all for being here. I'll call up our next moderator, Kristen Price. Kristen, if I could give you a little intro before you come up. Kristen serves as Senior Legal Counsel at the NCOSE Law Center. She advocates through litigation and legislation to end all forms of sexual exploitation, including sex trafficking, prostitution, child sexual abuse, and pornography. With a background in the First Amendment and human rights law, she previously served at Alliance Defending Freedom and holds a JD from Georgetown University Law Center. Kristen, please come up.
Thank you, Hania, for that kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. So glad that you're able to join us in person and online. I am joined on the panel today by Jewel Baraka and Joshua Broom. Jewel Baraka is an author and survivor who uses her voice to educate and bring awareness on the issues that arise out of her story. She's also an advocate who connects trafficking survivors in Los Angeles to essential resources. Joshua Broom is a best-selling author and speaker who shares his powerful redemption story to fight sexual exploitation and promote online safety. He serves as the executive director of Walk Worthy, a division of the American Association of Christian Counselors. Please welcome Joshua and Jewel. Thank you both for bringing your expertise to share with us today. I just want to start by giving you a chance to introduce yourselves a little bit more. So, Jewel, could you please share with us what drives your passion in this work?
Sure. I'm driven by my story. And to give you the 1-minute version of my story, I was trafficked at 14 on an adult hardcore porn set. And I use all those words intentionally. Of course, we all know what trafficking is in the context of porn. It was a predominantly adult set. And I use the word hardcore, even though it's not used as much now, to indicate that it was of a more extreme or graphic nature and that all the sex and violence was actual. It was not what I would call mainstream porn in the sense that I never signed anything, right? There was no paperwork. I don't even think they knew my real name. But it was a fairly sizable operation. It was a huge building converted into multiple porn sets, often operating at the same time. And so I always say there's a million corners of the porn world, and that was mine. And it was never guaranteed that I would survive that, but I did. And as soon as I knew my continued breathing was gonna keep going, I took the deep dive into healing and then rising to speak my story, which I did when I published my book about this piece of my story last year.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Joshua, we'd love to hear a little bit about your background as well. What motivates you to speak out on these issues?
What motivates me to speak out is the next person. So I like to try to live my life to the best of my ability to do the next right thing and then worry about tomorrow when it comes, but just doing the next right thing. And for me, my life was summed up in not choosing the next right thing, in that I was in the porn industry from 2006 to 2013. I had a long career. I made a lot of money. I had a lot of success, and it was born out of me believing, hey, if I do enough, maybe I'll feel as I've enough. I grew up without a dad, and while fatherlessness is on the rise in this country, not having something you need causes me to believe that maybe I could be my own savior, and that led me down that road. But for me today, I've been out of that industry for over a decade, and I had people come around me and provide me with grace and truth. And for the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to partner with NCOSE and learn from NCOSE. And what I've seen is, politics matter because policy matters, because policy impacts people, and I care a lot about people. So I love that we're in this room today talking about real problems that impact real people, and if I can share aspects of my story to both just allow people to understand how dark and deceptive the porn industry is, but also those people that either made decisions to be a part of it or were impacted by it. Whatever their life looks like today, I'm evidence that it doesn't. Their life doesn't have to stay that way. So again, I tell my story because I have this scar, but the scar, it used to be a wound, and it's been healed, and it points to the fact that there can be healing, and I know the healer.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So today we're releasing the report, and it's on how the pornography industry facilitates, profits from, and normalizes image-based sexual abuse. And so often people don't think of the pornography industry as an industry, or even consider that it has harms to those participating. So what do you wish people understood about what happens behind the scenes in the pornography industry?
I would just say that would you obviously you would say Major League Baseball, obviously an industry, NBA, obviously an industry, NFL, obviously an industry. Well, if you put all three of those together, it still doesn't equate to the amount of revenue that the porn industry generates. The fact that regarding ad spend, Pornhub, one website, ad spend $4.6 million per day. $1.7 billion per year. So obviously an industry, and you can only, the viability of marketing only exists when there's a copious amount of people watching it. So just that many people are wrestling with the cognitive dissonance of knowing that maybe I ought not watch this, but I find myself doing it anyway, and the real people that it perpetuates violence and harm to.
Massive industry, massively profitable. Jewel?
Yeah, and I would say as far as the behind the scenes, what I wish people knew is two things. But the first thing is that because it's visual, because of its format, we tend to relate to it like a Hollywood movie, right? And we know that in Hollywood movies they pull punches and tape sheets, and even at the end of most movies, you see this disclaimer that says no animals were hurt in the filming of this movie. And in our minds, we imply, well, no humans were hurt either, right? And that is the case for the most part in Hollywood movies, but that's not the case in porn. A lot of times there are real, actual humans being harmed in porn. And so I think it's important for us to make that distinction. And then the other thing is that there are dynamics happening on a porn set that make it harder for no to be heard, spoken, or regarded at all. And one of those is what I call this you against the crowd kind of dynamic. So I felt throughout those 3 years of being trafficked on the set, I felt like it was me against the whole set, right? And in my case, actually, I felt like no meant go, right? I would say no, and that was like a turn on, and they would go harder. But I think in a lot of, and so that's one possibility, but also there's the possibility of just your no not being heard, right? Or your no not being able to speak it, because there's this force, that's a powerful force of a whole set against you. So those are the two things I would say.
I just want to kind of chime into what you just said, because I mean that's the reality. Where I stayed in the industry for almost 7 years, and many of the people that I know, after some time, you don't want to stay, but you feel like you can't. And what happens in that industry is your no loses its volition, because you believe that, well, if selling myself for sex is the only thing that I can say yes to, and the industry, you are manipulated into thinking that, well, if I say no, then, whoever is advocating your behalf, whether it be an agent or whatever, they're going to say, well, if you are difficult to work with, then you're not going to get hired anymore. And the reality is just thinking about, well, if I say no to this, then I lose my ability to say yes to anything. So what happens is I say yes to everything and no to nothing, because I believe that no is not something that I can really say. And then regarding consent, I did over 1,000 films, and 100% of those films they filmed the consent prior to what happened. I didn't give consent to be X, Y, and Z to be happening to me, but you would film it first, because again, does in the same way that we talk about sex trafficking, force, fraud, coercion, does people ask me a lot, does that happen in the porn industry? No, it doesn't happen. It's the foundation upon what it's built on. It exists because of that. So they would film it prior to, because they would get you to believe that, well, you're doing this because you're going to have to do your makeup again, or you're going to be disheveled, so you're going to look better on camera doing it now. So just go ahead and give consent now, and it looks as if you did it after, but it's not.
You both describe a world, an industry that is extremely real. What's happening is very real, the violence, the exploitation, and then at the same time, consent isn't even taken seriously. No isn't spoken, isn't heard. How do people end up in this industry? How does that recruitment typically happen, especially given these kind of conditions? Who's usually groomed into it, and what impact does this have on them?
Sure. Well, I'm going to focus on the second half of that, because I was trafficked into porn, so I wasn't recruited in that sense. But I was definitely groomed. So the first few months in porn, I was just thrown into the crowd scenes. And then there was this moment where the producer calls me over and gives the speech you can imagine. I see something in you. I think we can make something of you. And honestly, all I think I heard was that I see you. I often say that no one sees you in the sex industry, which sounds funny in one way, but it's because nobody's really looking at you. They're looking at their own desires, right? And so I just heard, I see you, and I jumped at it, right? I didn't know what I was signing up for, but I agreed, right? And that moment of agreement, even though I had no idea what was coming, that moment of agreement I blamed myself for years afterward, because there was great trauma that happened to me in the porn industry, and I thought it was all my fault because I chose it somehow. But the truth is, I didn't have true freedom, right? Because true freedom is you can walk out the door without harm. I didn't have that. But it's a reality that I think a lot of survivors face, because they reached for something. They didn't know what they were reaching for. They didn't know what the result of that would be, but then they blame themselves afterward. And that, again, becomes, horrible implications inside of us, and also a silencing factor from us getting help, because we're like, it's our fault. I chose this. So.
Yeah, I'd say I'll age myself a little bit by the referencing, but I would say probably 99% of the girls that got in the industry when I was in the industry, 2006, it was the same story where they responded to an ad on either MySpace or Craigslist, and it was for modeling. It was for taking pictures for compensation. That was traditional modeling. They show up, and then they were coerced into removing an article of clothing once they felt uncomfortable. The same conversation, just gone about it in a multitude of different ways. It was ultimately, hey, you've already signed a release. I'm going to use these photos regardless of whatever you do. So you have two options. Either you can continue taking your clothes off and get paid, or I'm going to ruin you because I'm going to use these images anyway. And that was their story. And then they ended up, being trafficked to some extent. And then in the porn industry, if you're being trafficked and then all of a sudden you get offered to be on a set where there's somewhat of a controlled environment, even if it's not something that's optimal or ideal for you, it seems more safe than what you were doing, so it seems like a more viable option. Regarding for me, the way that I was recruited into the industry was literally a headhunter. So there were girls that would go out in Hollywood. I was working at a popular bar in West Hollywood. They came in, asked me, hey, would you be interested in doing pornography? I'd love to introduce you to our agent. And I met with him, and the first question he asked me was, how did I grow up? And I think in retrospect, he was, it was a value proposition. Hey, is there any aspect of your childhood that is broken so that I can, get information from you so that I can use language to manipulate you? And then once I said I grew up in a, single parent home, he started speaking to that aspect of my misplaced identity. And at the end of it, he's like, I can make you famous. You can be the guy, blah, blah, blah. And then the last thing he said, well, okay, if you want to do it, what do you want to go by? And the reality is, in porn, you almost often go by a pseudonym. Why? Well, if I can get you to remove, an aspect of your humanity from you, you'll do something. You'll be more, likely to do something that you would never do. In the same way, you look on social media, anyone that's primarily the antagonist, obscure username, obscure, meme for a profile picture. Why? Because there's no accountability or consequence tied to your actions.
So we know that in our current context, pornography is largely aggregated and profited from by these massive platforms like Pornhub, like Xvideos, and so on. In your view, do these kind of platforms, especially given everything that you've just shared, do they do enough to protect survivors from all of the harms, but from extortion, from content pirating, from doxing, from all of these things?
I mean, I'll just say really quickly, and then I'm sure you got something more valuable that I'm going to say. But I would just say, from my experience, when I signed my first contract, and in the porn industry, a lot of times people will ask me, it's like, you've been 10 years removed, and you're an evangelical preacher, and you do all this stuff. How can you do that if you're still getting royalties from the porn industry? I've never received 1 cent in royalties because I got paid $300 for the first time I did something. So you're an independent contractor, and when you sign that contract, you say, hey, this is where you get paid, and it's highlighted, and just sign these 3 places. But what you're signing, you're signing a W-9 or whatever, but in addition to that, you're signing a contract saying, hey, I'm giving all rights of any imagery, photos, audio, and also not only are you giving away your IP, in the contract it's stating that they can sell it to as many third parties partitioned forever if they want to, but they don't come to you. So what that happens practically, I did 1,000 films that got broken up into 100,000 pieces of content that ended up on sex toys, on dating websites. Still to this day, I've been out of the industry since January of 2013, and still to this day, content that I do not want on the internet is being monetized.
I think he covered it really well. I would say I think the Trafficking Hub campaign showed us really well this part of the industry. Obviously, that ability to download and upload makes it just impossible to control, and there's definitely not enough being done to protect survivors. So thank you for this report and for all the work you're doing to protect survivors.
Pornography is pervasive. What impact does it have on society more broadly that this kind of content can be so freely available and just there without, with impunity, really?
Yeah, I mean, I would just point you to, if you haven't heard some of the talks and the content that Heidi Olsen has, just the reality that that incest porn is something that's prevalent and it has a real impact on kids abusing each other, and in the number in which that's happening is astronomical. Not in different countries here, but it's even worse in Europe, even worse in Australia. So the fact that you're watching something that is being superimposed on people who are close to you, and that happening at a rate that's in the 60th percentile, is something that we should, this is beyond something that is shouldn't be watched. It's damaging real people and corrupting this culture.
And I want to speak for a moment to the impact on survivors. I will never forget that moment when they showed me my first film in a screening room full of men, and it was a shattering moment. I actually ended up on the back corner, like throwing up through the whole screening, because it was hitting me on several levels. One, it was hitting me that, one, I had never seen my sexual trauma before. Right? I had been abused and trafficked in prostitution, but usually the process was I disconnected and just pushed it out of my mind to survive, right? But now it was recorded forever. It couldn't be erased. It existed, and I could see it, right? So that was one thing. And then on another level, I just didn't know how broadly it would be distributed, right? So from now on, I knew that I didn't know who would have seen it. And so for the next decade at least, I would walk down the street looking down because I didn't want to catch a man's eye and wonder if he had seen it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's 43 people that I was close friends with. I knew their real names. I knew, their personalities. I knew what they liked to have, to eat. But those people, 41 out of the 43, they left the porn industry and they tried to do something else. But the world would not let them forget what they did and who the world said they were. And today, those 43 people are dead. They've died of either overdose or suicide. And in addition to that, the porn industry's response to their death is to make a compilation of all the scenes they've done and yet again double down on monetizing on the very fact that it was the thing that which took their life that they're monetizing from. And then for me as a dad, so I've got 4 young kids, and because of Section 230, on Twitter, someone posted a picture of my family and a sex act that I did 15 years ago, and there's no legal ramifications of that. So I'm not, I'm a pretty resilient guy, but when you talk about my kids or my family, it hurts in a way that is indescribable. And right now, there's no legal ramifications for something like that.
So I have one more question for you both, and we're just so grateful that you both came and have shared with us. But given the darkness, the just unspeakable evil you both walk through, born witness to, what gives you hope? What keeps you going?
For me, 2 things: connecting, which might sound strange, but actually, when you've been through such trauma, it's hard to connect to people. And there's such power in connecting. When we as human beings connect with each other that way, that's powerful. And then just seeing where I've come from, right? That I shouldn't even be alive, let alone healing and free and enjoying my life. So that to me gives me hope for the culture, that even though it's messy, the culture can heal and get better as well.
When I think about hope, 10 years ago, there was a person that I met and I said, hey, I'm this kid that, their daddy didn't want, and I've done all this bad stuff, and the things that create the most shame in my life, they're on the internet for the world to see, and they'll probably always be there. And she looked at me and said, hey, you're not defined by the worst thing you've ever done, and you're not defined by the greatest thing you'll ever do. And her name is Hope, and that's my wife, and we've been married for praise God. But so it was someone that loved me enough to both tell me the truth, but to do it with grace. And I get to tell people, with no shame, that aspect of my story. And for me personally, I've been forgiven by me placing my faith in Jesus Christ, and like that for me, for me to do the things that I do and to be where I'm at, it's the reality that no matter where you are, no matter where you've been, you can have hope, and you don't have to stay stuck where you are. And I just hope that I can be a light for someone else's life, regardless of what trauma or tragedy you've been through. You don't have to stay stuck where you are, and there's a life worth living on the other side.
Thank you both so much. This concludes our panel. Please join me in thanking our panelists.
On a video, I'm supposed to assume that it's you or not you based on your body, but maybe you're not showing your face in the video, which is very common.
Who exploits the loophole?
A lot. Fucking everybody. Everyone. So you make a lot of money. So for example, I could sign up tomorrow, I submit my ID, I'm putting all my real identification, my bank account and everything, and now I just rip content from other people where it's this guy's body and his dick look like it could be mine based on my face. I don't know, some shit like that, right? Okay, I'm tall, I'm slim, okay, this guy, okay, whatever, he looks kind of similar. I could just rip those videos, upload them as my own, and the people who review my video would probably be like, yeah, this is him in the video. I'd be like, yeah, it's close enough. And I'm gonna make thousands of dollars.
Do rapists use it, or?
Of course.
What about human traffickers or something? Could they use that loophole?
To do what? To make money? Of course.
Yeah.
We've had content partners of course.
You can get that.
The CPO knows, and as long as we made a meeting where we're it's kind of sketch, man, because the CPO of the company is the chief product officer, so he just wants to make money as much as possible and grow his product. And then you have Matt Scalici, who's the VP, chief legal officer, so it's CLO. So we've brought it up to the CPO, we brought it up to the CLO, and they're both telling us it's all good. And the CPO is especially telling us fuck off, it's all good. Stop.
So they know the risk.
Shut up. I wouldn't be able to defend this in court, Tell me, defend this. Tell me this is good. And they're like, yeah, it's all good. All right. Sorry, CPO is yeah, just, it's all good, man, don't worry. So we're all right. But we made a recorded meeting of that. So if ever shit hits the fan, on record, me and my boss Ramsey, we definitely identified that as being
Okay.
because we're being a lot of people at my level and up, we have depositions. You have to go to court.
But what's the solution then? What's your solution? What should be happening that's not?
You should have content up that you can't identify the person.
How would you do that?
Huh?
How would that be done?
Because they would lose a lot of money. That's why they don't want to do it. Which is fine. I'm not saying it's the wrong answer. It's for them to call the shots. If I was in their position, I'd probably do what they're doing too. I'd be it's all good. I'm not going to get caught. It's fine.
What exactly was on the site? Underage stuff? Was it literally
underage,
rape?
non-consensual? Yeah. Because you can always argue porn is technically, because you can always pretend that's not consensual.
Right.
But that line is very, very
kink.
blurry.
Yeah.
It's very blurry when you don't have confirmed people.
Yeah.
You don't know if it was actual rape video or fantasy. And I don't think they cared. Revenge porn, they didn't give a fuck.
There probably is a lot of money to be made.
Oh, there's a ton. And that's the problem. Once money's being made, morals get blurred. Yeah.
We can't specify exactly who the model is, the user using the model themselves in an advertisement cannot verify either. So if you have someone who just signs up, as long as their verification checks out, we know that that's an advertiser, but we don't know who the model is. And that's the biggest problem. You can have a scummy person who literally has underage OnlyFans girls, and he's just pushing out these ads, and no one would know any different. It has happened where people post things and then they'll be scrolling Pornhub, and then we've had people come in and be like, yeah, take that ad down, that's me. It's so hard because if you're not a Pornhub user, how would you know? People won't even see their own face if it's up there.
So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Lisa Thompson, who is the primary author of this report that we will be unpacking in the next couple of minutes. Lisa has been in the broader field of anti-trafficking, anti-sexual exploitation for many, many, many years. So please do stay around for a couple of minutes at 4 o'clock, and I will just tell you a little bit more about Lisa. Lisa has been with NCOSE for a couple of years, since 2015, and she will be departing us, but basically after today. But Lisa's a close ally, and we know that she'll be in our midst for many years to come, and just very grateful, just all the work that has gone into this project. Lisa's done anti-trafficking work around the world, so it's just that collective wisdom that's just really come to fruition in this report. So Lisa will be talking about the report, and I'm sure that whoever reads this report will just see the wealth of just incisive analysis. So much of that comes from Lisa's pen. So Lisa, such an honor to welcome you, and we're just eternally grateful for your work.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. All right. So as Marcel said, my name's Lisa Thompson, and I am the primary author of the report that NCOSE is releasing today. And actually, I'm probably going to be spending more of my time talking about why we wrote the report than even talking about what's in the report. So before I get into the specifics about what is in it, I want to tell you, why we did it. Why was this necessary? So I know that most of you here today, and probably many of you watching online, are already deeply familiar with the topic of image-based sexual abuse. It's a phenomenon that has wrecked lives of countless women and some men. And most of us have long known it's a common experience for sexually explicit images of women to be shared online without their consent on pornography and social media platforms. We've read numerous news reports about, or even personally know, survivors of this form of abuse. And for the past decade, the attention of those fighting IBSA has focused on holding people, overwhelmingly men, who non-consensually distribute sexually explicit material accountable. There's been much pioneering and invaluable work done to pass laws criminalizing their behavior. And this work was absolutely vital and just incredibly important. But meanwhile, pornography tube sites like Pornhub, Xvideos, XNXX, and Xhamster were cashing in on IBSA. They were literally building their empires by allowing, encouraging, and profiting from the distribution of image-based sexual abuse material on their platforms. Furthermore, their business model not only depended on image-based sexual abuse, but created a feedback loop that socially engineers pornography consumers to accept IBSA as normal. This ensured that pornography users would get in on uploading IBSA to their platforms and help the pornography industry rake in more and more profits. Thus, NCOSE's mission in authoring this report is to help recalibrate IBSA prevention efforts so that we don't miss the importance of attacking the roots of the system that has perpetuated IBSA on a global scale and profited from it. Additionally, it needs to be stated that the pornography industry's global distribution and profiting from IBSA is hardly a secret. Like what we're talking about today is not really new news. Those of us working in the movement to end sexual exploitation have known about this for years and worked relentlessly to combat it. However, this open secret didn't really enter the public consciousness until the publication of Nicholas Kristof's expose, The Children of Pornhub, in the New York Times. And since then, there have been other journalistic investigations on image-based sexual abuse material appearing in sites like Xvideos and Xhamster, but none of those have generated the same kind of stir that was ignited by Kristof's piece. And additionally, the information about the pornography industry's role in image-based sexual abuse has been scattered. You know, there's a report here, maybe it's from a publication in Germany. You know, that's not going to get caught by the eyes of many of us here in the United States. So you have one article here, one article there. So one of the important contributions of this report is its effort to create a more comprehensive picture of how the major internet pornography distributors, Pornhub, Xvideos, XNXX, and Xhamsters, collectively profit from and fuel image-based sexual abuse. So with that, I'll get to just a few of the highlights from the report. I hope everybody online has maybe already had a chance to download it. I know for those of you here, there is a handout, and I just want to point out that you can scan the QR code on the back and read the whole report. Okay, and we have a website, notafantasy.org, where the report can be accessed. So now to some highlights about the report. So next slide. To begin, I have to talk a little bit about the terminology, make sure we're on the same page there. So next slide. And you've heard us, several of us here today, use the phrase image-based sexual abuse. Now, when we knew a long time ago that we wanted to do this report, and we ended up spending literally months going back and forth trying to hammer out what we thought these terms meant. What is image-based sexual abuse? What is it, an umbrella term? What are the subforms of image-based sexual abuse? So we created this document called Identifying Image-Based Sexual Abuse Classifications and Definitions. And this can be accessed on the NCOSE website, and it's also available on ResearchGate. So today we have a very limited amount of time. I won't be getting into all the ins and outs of the terminology, but I do want to take a moment just to say what we say image-based sexual abuse is. So for us, IBSA refers to the creation, the manipulation, the theft, extortion, threatened or actual distribution, or any use of images for sexual purposes without the meaningful consent of the person depicted. So this can include the non-consensual distribution of sexually explicit material, and most of us have heard that referred to as, quote, revenge pornography. Not a term we like. You can read about that in that document there. Another category would be recorded sexual violence, so the recording of sexual assaults, the recording of sex trafficking victims. Another category, computer-generated sexually explicit material. Many people refer to that as deepfake pornography. And another category that is encompassed within this report, video voyeurism, when a person is recorded in a sexual context without their knowledge. So, IBSA and IBSA-themed material is shockingly common in mainstream pornography, as we will now discuss. So let's go forward. All right, so not only did we have to decide what we meant by IBSA, what were we talking about there, we had to determine what are we talking about when we talk about the pornography industry. So before going forward, I want to ask some of you, when you think of the major brands or major pornography companies, what are the names that come to your mind? What names are you familiar with? Vivid, okay. Kink. What? OnlyFans. That's interesting, yes. X-videos. X-hamster, okay. Pornhub. All right, well, let's go to the next slide. So how many of you have heard of Web Group Czech Republic Holding? Anybody? Maybe other than in our law center. I know Kristen is well familiar with that name. Ethical Capital Partners. Yeah, seriously, that's not a joke. It's hard to fathom, but that is the serious name of a porn holding entity, porn company, major porn company. Hammy Media Limited. So these are the mega corporations that hold vast different pieces, lots of different parts of the porn industry. So what looks to us from the outside as this highly fractured industry with lots of different companies is actually highly controlled by an oligopoly that consists of these companies. Now, the brands that these companies hold, let's go to the next slide. And any questions, we're going to have Q&A at the end. Okay. So one of the things in the report that we do is we try to create this comprehensive picture of who these entities are and what their place is in the pornography industry. These are the companies that are the primary distributors of pornography on the internet. These are the pieces that are owned by those companies I just told you. Ethical Capital Partners owns Pornhub. The Web Group, Czech Republic Group, owns X-videos and XNXX, and if you put those together, they're actually outsize Pornhub, okay? And then Hammy Media is the corporation behind X-hamster. So we took the data from SimilarWeb. Many of you might know of SimilarWeb. It's a company that ranks the global traffic on internet sites around the world and letting us know which companies have the biggest number of users. And it's been quite common for sites like Pornhub or X-videos to rank in the top 10, within the top 10 of the world's most trafficked sites. We're talking about going up against the likes of Amazon, TikTok, and Netflix. Now, currently, as of, if you amalgamate all the data from 2024, Pornhub is currently ranking 16th, X-videos 17th, X-hamster 26th, and XNXX 30th. This is a massive amount of global internet traffic devoted to consumption of pornography. Massive. So we wanted to make sure that we gave a picture of who these entities were and how much pornography is being consumed on these sites. We got the average monthly unique visitors to Pornhub was 290 million unique visitors per month. Per month. Wrap your head around that a moment. So we're literally getting to billions of total visits to these sites every year. Billion. So the point, well, next slide and I'll get to my bigger point. So now we're going to transition into how the pornography industry facilitates IBSA. Now in this report, you'll find that there's a page in which we list 9 different ways that we've identified through which the pornography fuels image-based sexual abuse. We don't have time in what we have today to go through all 9 of those. You have the report, you can read it and get all that information. But I do think it's important that we highlight a few of these today, and I'll be presenting them in the order that they appear here, so that the numeric order that is on this list. So to begin, next slide, the issue of sexual socialization. So we've just talked about the billions of views that these websites are garnering every year. That is a very powerful influence, right? You can think of them as influencers. Like we know about internet influencers who try to get lots of followers and get people onto their sites, and then they're promulgating certain ideas or selling certain products. Well, it's basically the same idea with these porn companies. They're selling a product and they're trying to get more and more people to come to their sites. But what's important to recognize here is that the industry does not merely respond to a consumer demand. This is a point that was made by Dr. Jennifer Johnson, and I think it's something well worth repeating. The industry does not merely respond to consumer demand, it actively crafts it, and in its pursuit, it works to circumscribe consumer choice. Now, this is interesting because what we hear about the pornography industry is that this is the way to explore your sexuality. Oh, you can go online and you can basically find yourself sexually. But it's the complete opposite that is true. Your sexuality is being technologically engineered by the pornography industry. And we're going to look at how that happens. Now, when it comes to IBSA, if we go next slide, one of the main ways that this occurs is that IBSA theme material, so image-based sexual abuse material, that's material that has that theme, is searchable on the top pornography websites. You can go to these sites and you can put in various search terms that are clearly related to non-consensual material. And I think about your words, Jewel, about no means go. That the whole idea here is the no, right? The violation that people did not consent to this is the very point of what makes this material desirable. This is the sexual turn-on, the non-consensual aspect of it. Now, there's tons of terms that you can search for this material. You can go onto these websites and whammo, it'll just pop right up. And when it comes to things like video voyeurism, like the issue of basically spying on people, there are lots of places where these video titles tell us that this is occurring. Like they have video voyeurism from restrooms, from changing rooms, from Airbnbs, from hotels, from beaches, and even gynecological facilities. Next slide. And so here are the results of some terms that we plugged into these sites and the number of videos that were returned. And we get into a little bit more detail about some of the more technical aspects about this chart in the report. But you can see, hopefully, maybe not, it's a little bit hard to see in the back, but we have put in terms like hidden, leaked, real hidden, real voyeur, spy, stolen. These are all indicative of this is not something that people consented to the distribution of. And they for the most part, return results on these platforms. Now, on Pornhub, we are seeing the advent of some warning messages for 3 terms. But yet, there's a whole host of related terms that they have no problem allowing. Now, why is that? So they're being very selective about the terms that they are not allowing to surface results because they know they're going to profit from this material. So they're making it look like, oh yeah, we're fighting IBSA. In the meanwhile, they're allowing all these other related terms to surface results. And you'll find when you look at these in more detail that oftentimes the sites are employing misspellings, slang phrases, certain word spacing in order to allow these terms to surface results. Okay, next slide. And a specific look at some of the video voyeurism type videos that are available like on Xvideos and XNXX. One title, Spy on Women of All Ages with Spy Cam in the Public Bathroom, over 800,000 views. So while you look at that earlier chart and maybe our search term only has maybe 16,000 videos, but when you look at some of the specific videos, they'll literally have tens, hundreds, or even millions of views accumulating on those videos. So I think what I'm trying to say here is that there's tremendous power to sexually socialize the consumers of these sites, the users of this material, to look at image-based sexual abuse material as normal. This is just what everybody thinks is sexually stimulating. It's fetishizing abuse, is exactly what these pornography companies are doing. Other terms: spying in the dressing room, hidden camera in real public bathroom, or I've captured this couple in an Airbnb. So I have to say, this definitely makes, walking through life a whole nother experience. It's like you get a creepy feeling, like you can't go to an Airbnb without wondering, being concerned and having to do a scan about what's here. Am I being filmed? All right, next slide. Some more examples. Search results from a term like without consciousness on X videos, returning over 15,000 videos. Now, without consciousness, what? Is this person been drugged? Are they passed out from alcohol? Like, what is it? So they don't know what's happening to them. Hey, you cannot give meaningful consent if you're not conscious. An X-Hamster site about upskirting with more than 11 million views. So upskirting, the phenomenon of men chasing around after women and trying to literally take images up their skirts while they're out in public. So a woman cannot even transverse public space without being concerned that her walking around is going to be turned into somebody's pornography. And then another term like Pornhub. Here we have Pornhub. If you typed in, this was in February 2024, if you typed in real voyeur, they were also happy to provide you with related search terms. So if real voyeur didn't give you what you wanted, they had a host of other related terms that might be helpful to you. Terms like real public sex or voyeur amateur, I think voyeur and voyeur wife, real hidden massage. So again, all these related material that would help further somebody on their IBSA related pornography journey. Next slide. Another example from X videos in this case, hidden camera in airport public bathroom with more than 8 million views and downloadable. Next slide. So, this is important because, as has been already explained elsewhere in research, imaginations are limitless, but they can be fed. So, the porn industry is feeding the beast. They make this available and they also feed it so that people want more of it. The imaginations are limitless, but they can be fed. There is such a thing as a sexual meme, fantasies that replicated and spread like wildfire, and typing it into search engines alters the sexual universe, both in terms of what it provides and what people can sexualize. Next slide. Now, interesting study from 2021. Researchers had analyzed the landing pages of Pornhub, X videos, and X-Hamster for 6 months and found that that 1 in every 8 title described activities that constituted sexual violence, including image-based sexual abuse. Image-based sexual abuse was the 3rd most common category. This is important because it is the landing page. What does every website owner try to vigorously curate? Their homepage, right? So you're serving up on your homepage image-based sexual abuse. This is critically important. All the eyeballs of all those millions of unique users every month are going to land on the homepage, and they're going to find content that normalizes image-based sexual abuse. All right, and I know I'm close to time, and we have a lot more to say. I have a lot more to go over, so we're going to move a little faster. Next slide, please. So in addition to what we've just talked about, the availability of IBSA-themed content on these sites, and it could be material that's either intended to mimic image-based sexual abuse material, or it can be real, actual image-based sexual abuse, okay? It could be both. In either case, they are socializing their users to view that content as normal and to derive sexual pleasure from it. But what's, I think, more insidious than it's just mere availability is that this whole system is very technologically engineered. It's not an accident. These pornography companies are mining user data. They are collecting data on what users have viewed before, and they're using that to create tailor-made content. So if you happen to look at something once or twice, you're probably going to get served it again. It'll be algorithmically served up again, and it might be even more to your liking than it was before. So looking at IBSA themed material could take you down a vortex that is more and more related to violation and more serving up more and more image-based sexual abuse themed content. You've got algorithmic recommendations, and you've got all this indexing, tagging, and categorization, this intentional listing, categorizing content based on themes that are inherently based on image-based sexual abuse, spying, sexual assault, being unconscious, right? That's intentional categorization to drive people's sexual appetites to material that is not non-consensual. Okay, next slide. And before I wrap up, because I know I'm probably over time, definitely want to touch on this issue, which is the issue of industry profiteering, the free pornography profit model, what's been called the freemium profit model. Again, this is no secret. The idea that the pornography industry has made pornography free is everybody knows it. If you're on the internet anyway, that's not a secret. But it was kind of an evil genius idea. The whole, why? It's very counterintuitive. Why would you make something that you want to make money off of available for free? But the whole profit-making model is that you bring more eyeballs to the site. So more eyeballs to the site, that means more traffic. More traffic means more advertisers are going to be interested in advertising on your platform because, wow, you've got how many millions of unique monthly users? How many billions of annual users? Wow, that's like a place I want to have. That's what the advertisers think. That's attractive. So having copious amounts of free pornography brings in lots of eyeballs, drives up your advertising revenue. So even if you're not paying, you are contributing. So a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm not paying, so I'm not participating in the harm that the pornography industry produces. But you are. You're driving up their advertising revenue just by looking. And then you have the issue of anonymous user uploading. How are you going to profit? How are you going to have enough free pornography to supply all the demand? I don't think there's enough pornography studios, formal producers in the world that could supply all the content that's been necessary for sites like Pornhub to keep people coming back. So you empower anonymous third parties to upload content, and whammo, your supply problem is over. You turn the whole world, anybody who wants to be, can supply your pornography for you. And guess what? We're not going to really check about who you are, and we're not going to check about who's in your video. We couldn't care less. And as in fact, as the video that we saw from Sound Investigations, one of the insider people said they really didn't give an F, right? About revenge porn, non-consensual material. So this is another key area of how the industry has profited from image-based sexual abuse. And next slide. Another important point, very quickly, we talked about the anonymous user uploads. This is kind of another angle on it. I won't talk about that now, but I do want to point on the weak content moderation. It's kind of like a joke. I mean, when Canada did an investigation into Pornhub, the owner of MindGeek at the time said, oh, well, We have human moderators of all of our content, which is like utterly preposterous. Uploading millions of videos every year, and we're getting human moderation on all of them. But when we find out, well, we're not watching them with the sound on, and our moderators have to watch hundreds of these a day, and they wouldn't give a straight answer to how many moderators they had. But there's been a lot of investigating, looking into them, and the New York Times reported that, compared to Facebook, which employs about 15,000 in-house and outsourced content moderators, MindGeek at the time was estimated, because we're all, they're guessing, they can't get a firm answer, had about 80 moderators for literally millions of videos being uploaded to its site. So this vastly contributed to the phenomenon of image-based sexual abuse material being uploaded to these sites and being made available. Next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to mention that within the report, we do touch on the very important phenomenon of AI and the tragic misuse of AI for what we call forged pornography. A lot of people refer to it as deepfake. I don't think that's the best way we should talk about it, but it is taking images of individuals who have never appeared in pornography, manipulating those images, and making it appear as if they have been in pornography. That's forging. That's forgery. And it's also identity theft. It's an invasion of people's privacy. It's fraud. It's sexual violence. And it's an obliteration of personal autonomy. And it's something that we all have to do more to address. All right, next slide. Yeah, and we'll, last, is this the last? Okay, one more. Go forward. And lastly, I just want to, it's already been, I think, very much emphasized by our panel earlier today about the fact that there is trafficking within the pornography industry. And this is a point we couldn't leave this event without emphasizing. It's important because a lot of people talk about the issue of image-based sexual abuse in ways which I think gloss over the fact that that within the pornography industry itself, performers are trafficked. People are trafficked for the production of pornography. And as you can see here, there's plenty of headlines attesting to that fact. Pornhub, MindGeek, ALO is in a deferred prosecution agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York for their role in a major sex trafficking case where they had a channel that featured nothing but victims of sex trafficking. And they knew about it and didn't take the videos down. So all that content is image-based sexual abuse. It's non-consensual material. So that's an important closing point that we don't want to gloss over. So those are a few of the highlights from the report. I hope everybody will take it, print it out or read it on your tablet, digest it. But the key takeaway here is that it's time to move our discussion on image-based sexual abuse from merely the individuals who upload this material, the individual actors who upload their ex-wives, the sex tape they made with their ex-wife, to the platforms that are literally technologically engineering, sexually socializing the world to view image-based sexual abuse material as normal, as something that it's completely legitimate to consume, and that it's just that any person has a right to participate in. That's just outrageous, and I hope that you will join with the National Center on Sexual Exploitation on combating this and holding these platforms accountable and getting to the root systems that are normalizing image-based sexual abuse around the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. That was amazing. I'm just going to call up Megan Griffin from our amazing public policy team, just to unpack some of the policy responses to image-based sexual abuse, and you'll also find these in the report. There we go, Megan.
Thank you, Marcel. Hi, everyone. I'll keep this brief. We have had some incredible progress in tackling the problem of image-based sexual abuse with Congress's recent passage of the Take It Down Act, which makes image-based sexual abuse a federal crime and requires platforms to take it down within 48 hours of notice by the victim. This is amazing news for our movement, but there is still so much more to be done. Here at NCOSE for years, we've been calling for Congress to require platforms to require age and consent verification of all individuals depicted in sexually explicit material. It is not enough for them to just be allowed to host it. They must have meaningful consent for everyone in those videos. We are also calling on Congress to repeal Communications Decency Act Section 230 of 1996, which has allowed these platforms to host illegal material for almost 30 years now. It is high time that Congress take real steps to tackle this problem, hold these platforms accountable for their criminal and inhuman and unethical behavior. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today.
Okay, right. So we're gonna go into a question and answer session. We're gonna keep it pretty short. So if I can just join on the panel, Lisa, Megan, and Kristen. Thank you. So I'm going to just start off. So for those, I'm sure there's some questions in the audience. Just gather your thoughts around them, and I'm going to invite everybody to engage. Andrew, if there's anything from online, let me know. But I'm going to start off with Kristen Price. Kristen, obviously you are, as part of our law center, civil litigation, multiple cases ongoing, as related to the pornography industry. But here's a question. Tell us more about a case that really falls squarely within this domain of image-based sexual abuse. Tell us about the Limestone matter.
Yes, so we are representing survivors of image-based sexual abuse in a case against Pornhub and X-Hamster. It was a case involving a women's sports team, and the perpetrator had placed this hidden camera, spy cam, in the locker room that they were using, and then it was uploaded onto Pornhub. And Pornhub didn't take it down, even though there were comments suggesting, from the users even suggesting they didn't think it was consensual. And then they took it down eventually when the police got involved. But Pornhub and X-Hamster, as you heard, they have spy cam tags and categories on their site specifically intended to drive users to that type of content for their own profit. Pornhub even listed hidden camera as a trending search in 2020. And so in our case, Pornhub, of course, filed a motion to dismiss, trying to argue that Section 230 gave them some form of immunity as a website, and the court said, no, it doesn't, essentially. And so we've been in discovery for the last year or two, and we are actually set to go to trial this fall, which is a huge milestone in the fight to hold these kind of platforms accountable.
Thank you, Kristen. Is there any questions from the audience? There we go, ma'am.
I have several. I'm not pertinent to this particular answer or response. But,
sure.
First, where are the main companies based? Like, where's the unethical, ethical company based? And then also, pertaining to going after the bigger fish, we have been working on policy to combat child trafficking. I'm a survivor of child trafficking. And this year, coming year, we're going after the demand side of the equation. We're going after the buyers. How can you go after the CEOs? How are you planning on going after the big corporate parents? And then how do you fight virtual reality and AI at the systemic level? Because we all know virtual reality is going to just inculcate and enculturate gamers into more violence against women and younger boys and whatnot in that area.
Great, thank you.
Oh, well, I can answer the question about ethical capital partners. I believe they are British Virgin Islands based. I believe that's in the report. And as for the X videos and XNXX, they are Czech Republic based, even though the owners or developers of those sites were French, but the websites are based in, or their management is based in rather nondescript building in Prague. There's been some very interesting articles about that. And I believe Hammy is one of them is I think it's Cyprus. As for the other issue, it's kind of I don't have a good answer. Maybe Kristen, you can, about how to hold them accountable.
I mean, I think in general on the systemic side, it's making these companies suable, and that's what we've been trying to do. But a lot of cases have been dismissed because of this Section 230 immunity, and it makes it so that they've been able to just operate with this massive level of impunity because they're not really being prosecuted, of course, but they can't even really be sued like normal companies can. So I think making it so that they can be is really big for accountability long term.
Yeah, so that makes the repeal of Section 230 really imperative. Exactly. Yeah, the key. Yeah. What would you say?
I would back you right up. I think it's incredibly imperative that we repeal Section 230. In 1996, when the law was put in place, it took you half an hour to download a song, right? Today, these videos can be downloaded and screen grabbed instantly, and there's no way for us to hold the platforms accountable for hosting these videos. So.
What about virtual reality? Any thoughts on where, I mean, we all know where that's going to go, but how do we curtail that at the infancy stages?
What do you think, Kristen? Any thoughts? I think that's the next frontier for us to dig into.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I've got a quick question online, actually to Megan. Paving the Way Foundation question. What actions can we take out here to help move policy along to keep our kids safe?
Special shout out to Jan Edwards of Paving the Way Foundation. Come up to the Hill. Call your congresspeople, call your senators, hold them accountable for not jumping onto bills like the Kids Online Safety Act and helping us repeal Communications Decency Act Section 230. And we really encourage Congress to reintroduce legislation that will require the age and consent verification of all individuals depicted in sexually explicit material. And when that is reintroduced, please knock on your elected representatives' doors. It is so important that they hear from you. Jan is a professional at that.
Great shout out. Any other questions? There we go.
I just wanted to ask, in addition to trying to achieve accountability and maybe offering legal representation, what else can advocates do to help survivors of the porn industry? I know we've gotten to hear from some survivors today, but where should they direct them to go?
I think in terms of other forms of support, I know we have some resources listed on our website, just groups that we found are helpful and do good work. I think also what Meg said about just on the advocacy side with the legislation is also really, really important because that's what allows other forms of accountability to go forward. So.
Great. I've got another online question here. Maybe to you, Lisa, difference, I don't think from what I've heard that you've conflated the two necessarily, but the difference between computer-generated sexual material and IBSA, that's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question, what if research showed that by watching AI sexual images, these men would less likely to abuse an actual child? How would you respond to those?
Okay, first of all, IBSA is an umbrella term.
Yeah.
So it's the large umbrella under which there are different buckets of forms of abuse or abuse material. We've talked about recorded sexual violence, so that would be recordings of sex trafficking victims, recordings of sexual assaults. There's the video voyeurism. And then another bucket is the computer-generated material. And it's important to recognize that computer-generated material is still dependent upon the images of real people. All of those all those AI models are built off of scraped material that includes literally millions of data points about images and things off of the internet, and it has included, there's research that shows that those training models that they're built on have included images of rape, non-consensual material. It's astonishing that we have abuse-trained AI models. So the idea that you're going to get so to begin with, I think there's a faulty premise that somehow AI in itself is some more ethical way to generate material. It's already ethically compromised. Additionally, what was the latter part of? About consumption. So the idea that we're going to have a bunch of men decide to start using AI-generated pornography, and somehow that will lead to less abuse. There's no evidence of any kind of palliative effect of pornography, of any kind of pornography use. Zero. Nothing. And in fact, I think that the evidence is the opposite, that any use of pornography is going to lead to some form of escalation. So in other words, you use something for a while, it isn't satisfying, you have to move to some other form of material. So the idea that you're going to just use something that's computer-generated and not eventually migrate into something that might involve real people, I think is a very faulty idea.
Right. Megan, did you want to add something?
I also wanted to add that men who view child sexual abuse material are far more likely to be hands-on offenders. And I know our fantastic research institute had given us some statistics around that, but it's a faulty premise that viewing it does not make them more likely to be hands-on offenders.
Thanks, Megan. Thank you, Lisa. You've got another question here. Let's just quickly check this one. Yeah, the one. Okay. Just stumbled on your conference. I don't know if it's been covered or not, but what does the women's movement have to say about women being exploited like this?
I think, to me, it seems like there is an isolated movement that the broader women's movement is perhaps that's not connecting with the broader women's movement. There is a very active community of survivors of image-based sexual abuse material, of people who've had their sexually explicit material themselves non-consensually distributed by ex-partners and so forth. They are very active. They have pioneered incredible research and been the pioneers of a lot of the legal reform. But I don't sense that the broader women's movement is taking on this issue. Maybe I'm missing something, but that's my sense. Kristen?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think historically, the women's movement has been involved to some degree for a really long time in the 70s and 80s, like kind of sounding the alarm on this before there ever was an internet. Andrea Dworkin's book, Pornography, Men Possessing Women, is outstanding and nails it completely, even though it's probably 40 years old at this point. So.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? One more.
Was this American-centric? Was most of your work and research and findings based on America, or was it a global study where you found different findings in the UK, in the EU versus Asia, Southeast Asia versus Africa?
Okay, so the question is whether our study was international or more US-centric. So there are illustrations that we provide of image-based sexual abuse going on in different places in the world. So a case from France, North Korea is a major illustration of the normalization of spy camming. So we talk about instances of those cases in parts of the world, but the core research, like the search terms, were based on being located in the United States.
Okay, one more question online. Has there been any success in reducing traffic to porn sites by legal intervention to shut down their sites or block access based on contravening a wide array of human rights? More on the enforcement side, legal intervention.
On the enforcement side, I know Backpage obviously was shut down on that basis, but I don't think it has been the most common remedy overall for these sites. Omegle as well. Yeah, thank you.
So in other words, there's still a long road ahead. Yeah.
Great. Okay, our time is pretty up. I'm just going to make it open up for one round of questions or comments. Very brief comment. Christos, artificial intelligence and its role in amplifying everything we've discussed here today. Maybe just a quick comment from you. I know you're very much in that field as well.
Yeah, well, number one, just want to affirm everything that was shared. It's been really enriching, although it's just really hits your heart really hard. So on the generative AI side, I think a key lesson is that if we don't rectify the problems that have been present pre-Gen AI, it's only going to get worse. And a principle has been that there as more and more content gets sucked up by large language models, whether it be ChatGPT or whoever the provider is, there's a disconnect between the underlying content creator and then the output of that. And so we need to rectify this intellectual property disconnect. And so this is a platform issue. The platforms are responsible for that. And so what has been shared today about getting to the root cause is, I think, so important. Otherwise, we just sort of, it's like whack-a-mole. You're dealing with a symptom, but not the root cause. So, yeah, we really have to rectify this property rights issue.
Great. Thank you, Christos. Thank you for that. Okay, that concludes the panel. That includes the session for today. But we just want to make quite an exciting announcement. So if you will indulge us with a few more minutes, Andrew, and I'm sure the online is still running there. But I did mention to everybody that Lisa, our amazing VP of our research institute, is departing from NCOSE. And so, Lisa, it is my profound honor to present the Josephine Butler Award to an individual whose tireless dedication has illuminated the path to justice for countless individuals harmed by systems of sexual exploitation. So we really want to celebrate you, Lisa, and we'll continue the celebration afterwards. It's a networking session. But just allow me to just read the following citation. Lisa's work exemplifies the spirit of this award's namesake, Josephine Butler, the iconic 19th century activist who fought courageously for the safety and dignity for prostituted women in a society that failed to understand systems of exploitation. Like Butler, Lisa has never turned away from the heart of injustice, but instead stepped into it with grace, determination, and an unrelenting commitment to truth. For years, Lisa has fought against the shadows of exploitation, dismantling systems that really degrades human dignity. Her powerful vision connects the threads of sexual exploitation from pornography's public health crisis to the destructive realities of the sex trade. Lisa's championed survivors, challenged cultural complacency, and through her work demanded that our society hold exploitation and exploiters to account. Through her role with NCOSE, she shared groundbreaking policy analysis, training, and resources that not only advocate for change but also empower others to join this movement. Her voice has echoed far beyond boardrooms and conferences, touching lives across the globe, from the anti-trafficking programs in Cambodia to strategic alliances with policymakers here in Washington, D.C. She really is an example of protecting human dignity and holding truth in the highest regard. Lisa's steadfast leadership has reaffirmed that truth, that every individual, no matter their circumstances, is worthy of justice, compassion, and the chance to flourish. Lisa is more than a professional. She's a champion of human dignity, a force for change, and above all, a beacon of hope for those who have suffered in silence. Lisa, thank you for all that you've given NCOSE and so many people around the world in your time with us and to this movement which you continue to inspire. So please join me in congratulating a true champion for justice, Lisa Thompson. Great. Thank you, everybody online and people in DC. Thank you for joining us. And the report is available online. Please download, and we'd love to know your thoughts. So please do give us feedback. Thank you.